I had mentioned Bangladesh in between, Dr. Gopinath, because IMF projections for South Asian economies 2020-21. India minus 10.3%, Sri Lanka minus 4.6%, Bangladesh 3.8% positive. Now, if Bangladesh's per capita GDP, you seem to suggest, could actually outstrip India in this year. Now, that has, of course, created a lot of buzz here, because the thought that Bangladesh is now outstripping India is an obvious source of concern. What does that reflect? Has Bangladesh got something right in recent times that perhaps India has not?
Rajiv, just stepping away from Bangladesh specifically, we have seen countries in the world, including Vietnam, Bangladesh, Vietnam, they are low-income countries, but they've been able to contain the spread of the pandemic much more effectively, and that has been an important, an important factor. I don't think we should sit on judgment at this point about, exactly why some people got it right and wrong, but and we will learn about which measures work better going forward. But India is a large country, and it's a major economy. In terms of scale, it's not exactly comparable. I think we should focus on India here and see what needs to be done to come out of this, really dire crisis. But you have to keep in mind that India is a country with a lot of potential. 3 years ago, 3 years ago, or maybe even more recently, it was one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It has that potential. It has a young demographic. And that's what one should leverage to come out of this crisis with the right policies.
I'll come to the global picture in a moment. I just want to understand from you, the 5 trillion dream, though, the $5 trillion economy dream, though, seems to have received a major setback in that sense.
Everywhere in the world, the projected improvement in living standards has had a major setback. And, that's true in terms of for India too. But again, this is a crisis that was unprecedented, a pandemic that the world didn't see coming. And, at this point, you have to get the policies in place to make sure that you come back to your 2019 levels and then figure out the reforms that's needed to expand on growth.
You've titled your report A Long and Difficult Ascent, looking at the world economy. And it appears that most of the advanced economies have been particularly hit. The US 4.3% negative, the UK 9.8% contraction, Brazil 5.8%, South Africa 8.0%, China is the lone exception. What explains this? If you look at your numbers, China is the one economy which seems to have been able to sort of climb out of any recessionary spiral.
China is quite an outlier, Rajdeep. So if you look at between 2020 and 21, China will grow by 10% relative to 2019, while pretty much everywhere in the world they're going to be below 2019 levels. So you can see it's a very large difference. What can explain it? One, they have been found very effective in controlling the spread of the pandemic, and they did it very quickly. They did it early on, and you did see some recent spikes that happened, but they were able to take localized measures. They've been very aggressive at contact tracing, testing, and that has worked very well. The second piece that's worked well for them is the big increase in global demand for medical equipment, for office equipment, because people are now working from home. And that has had a positive effect on China's exports. And a third piece is their public infrastructure spending push that's brought about the growth. But of course, we do worry about a very unbalanced recovery in China because it's being driven mainly by public spending as opposed to private demand, especially with consumption. Private consumption still remains well below pre-pandemic levels, but it is recovering.
So China is one outlier. The other outlier, and you mentioned it briefly, is Vietnam. Is it that these smaller emerging market countries have been able to handle the pandemic better? Is that where perhaps India's size has gone against it? The fact that we had this very severe national lockdown, which completely sort of finished any form of economic activity for 3 months. Is there a lesson from the smaller countries like Vietnam?
I think the lesson is that prior experience matters. And a country like Vietnam had the SARS epidemic, and they learned from that. And so they had the systems in place to very quickly respond to it. And so parts of the world that had that history of experience, they kind of got the steps right very quickly early on. And they've been able to deal with the pandemic better. I think for many other countries, this has been a surprise. And, even now, it's really interesting. I mean, I'm in constant touch with epidemiologists, and the knowledge in terms of how does the transmission happen, who's most susceptible to it, why in India, despite the number of cases being high, the recovery rates are much better, the fatality rates are much better. There is not that much understanding still about it. So this is a difficult crisis to deal with.